Okay, welcome everybody, live from the beautiful and virtual Jonas Center in Novato, California. KRCN is on the air and presents the Rotary Club of Novato Meeting Hour. Welcome. So we have a few extra minutes and I'd like to start our program a little early. Are you okay with that, Reggie?
I am.
Okay, so Gary, you want to introduce our program today?
So I want to make this brief enough that we can get a little flavor of Reggie and what kind of a person he is, my resources, and what I've followed for over 6 months. He's an outstanding person. He's a songwriter, a singer, a storyteller. He's been doing this for over 45 years in the entertainment business. And his words were, he focuses on intergenerational and cross-cultural understanding and social change. That sounds like a pretty good statement if we think about it. He teaches at the John F. Kennedy Center on Changing Education through the Arts Program. He's a fellow in the Council of Independent College Lecture Program and a director of music education for the UU. You'll have to tell me what UU is, Reggie, Living Legacy Project. And he really has a passion for songs and singing and what that can be for all of us. He's a descendant of slaves. He has a lot to talk about. I just want to welcome from New York, but really from Michigan now in the last few minutes, Reggie Harris. Thank you, Reggie.
Thank you so much. We will not rest till the storm is over. We will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. We will not rest till the storm is over. We will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. It's been a long, hard journey on a winding road. So many have gone before us. They carried a heavy load, but they went there singing as they made their way. Now it's in their footsteps we follow as we work today. We will not rest till the storm is over. Hey, we will not lay this burden down. Well, we will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. We will not rest till the storm is over. We will not lay this burden down. Well, we will keep each other strong. We'll love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. I know that you're weary. We all feel the pain. Sometimes the actions of the world will try your soul again, but I believe there's a better day and it's coming our way. That's why we're raising our voices as we work today. We will not rest till the storm is over. Hey, we will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. All around us there's hatred. All around us there's fear. Violence touches our lives and the message is clear. We mourn our martyrs and our hearts they'll stay. Then we'll sing, we shall overcome and go on our way. We will not rest till the storm is over. Hey, we will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. We will not rest till the storm is over. Hey, we will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on ground, till we stand all together on solid ground, till we stand all together on solid ground, till we stand all together on solid ground. Thank you. Thank you. That's a song that I wrote last March after I got home from my last date. I was playing a school in Buffalo, the St. Mary's School for the Deaf, when they got a message from the school superintendent of the area saying that 2 cases of COVID had been found and that we needed to close the school for the day. I had done 2 shows for their lower school that day, and they sent me home. I drove across New York State and got home. And of course, like all of us, began to try to figure out what was going on in the world. And as I looked and I observed what was going on, I remembered the words of James Baldwin, who I was privileged to hear in a lecture early in my career. I was at a conference and he was the principal speaker. And he got up and he talked to all of us about the importance of education and the importance of history. And then, since there were college students and college staff and musicians and artists and all kinds of sponsors in the room, he turned to those of us who were artists and he said, you know, I'm so happy to be here with all of you artists. We were all there basically to try to get work, to get colleges to book us. And that's what we were focused on. But he shifted our focus, or at least he shifted mine that night. Because he said the role of the artist is to see what's happening in your world, in your society, and the places that surround you, and to take in what it is you see. You will see beauty, you will see pain, you will see sorrow, you will see joy, you will see things that need to be fixed. He said the role of the artist is to show your society through your art form what it is you see. And at that moment, I was just feeling a little special because, you know, he was singling out all of us in the room. I turned to my friend, Michael, who was sitting next to me, a fine guitarist, and I said, we're special. And he said, yeah, we are. And then James Baldwin said, sometimes when you show your society what you see, it will be those things that are hard, that are difficult. It'll be things that they might not want to see. And both of us clouded up a little bit, because that's not what we were about. We were singing lots of songs and thinking about entertaining people and make them happy. And that certainly is important. But he said, this is your role. And sometimes people will not love you for showing them, but you will be helping your society to change and to grow. And certainly in my role as an educator, I have tried to do that over the course of years, always with the idea that we can inform while we entertain, but we also must think about what the big picture is. What is the perspective that we are able to share? And I will say that for 45 plus years, I have had a wonderful time traveling and showing people what it is I see. And of course, everything that I see, that, well, for the artist, that is our version, our filter of what it is we see. We collaborate with others and what they see, and we have those courageous conversations that hopefully will lead us to a better understanding of who we all are. And so that is what I'll do here today. I'm happy to share just a little bit about myself, a little bit about what I do, a little bit of family background, and I'll be using songs to do all of that. I'm going to invite you to sing. I don't know how many of you love to sing, but I'm a folk performer, so I'm under contract to get you singing at least once or twice. So that's the way that's going to work. So I'm going to ask, if you're sitting with somebody, that you turn to them and you say, I can't wait to hear you sing. And if you're sitting by yourself, we've got it right here. So I will tell you that I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the city of brotherly love, as they used to say in those days. I was born into a family of folks who migrated from Virginia. I'm sure that you know, many of you, if you've read the book, The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, a fine book that talks about the Black migration, when between 1901 and about 1968, 6 million African Americans fled the South. They were looking for a new, more productive, more effective, safer life. They called it the Promised Land. They thought that when they got to the North, that all their troubles would be solved. Well, we know the world doesn't work like that. They got there and they discovered that it was different and that they would have to work for things in a different way. But this is the human experience. This is what we all experience as we travel in the world and as we study our history. And I have always been a very, very fun student, a marvelous follower of history. I loved history in high school, but the only thing that they did was they usually just kind of opened the book and read some things, names, dates, places. That's a horrible learn the way history. The best way to learn history is by music and by song and by story, because story and song is what all of us human beings are hardwired for. All of our people from whenever they came with stories, and usually they came with songs. And so it was in that community in Philadelphia where I grew up. My mother used to take us to church. Now, she took us to church every opportunity. Helen Harris wanted to make sure that we were in that community of people who were sharing stories, sharing their joys and woes. And they shared most of them by using songs. They had brought those songs with them from the time of slavery. Many of those songs are spirituals, as Frederick Douglass talked about them, were the songs that helped them to identify and acknowledge their situation. The songs that rose out of slavery helped them to realize that after making that long journey across the ocean, they found themselves in a place where they were owned by someone else, where their lives were controlled. But one thing that they knew from their African homelands, all of those, they knew they had a light. It didn't always shine, as all of our lights don't always shine, because life can be very hard. But one of the early songs that I grew up singing, my mother tells me that I first sang when I was about 3 years old. And one of the first songs I sang was a song that I grew up thinking was simply a easy little children's song, "This Little Light of Mine." But that song comes from a deep tradition of people who sang that song to remind themselves that they had a light, and that as hard as life was, that light could still shine through the darkness, and they could help others to remember they had a light. So I'm going to sing that song, and I'm going to ask you to sing along and just fall in. The spirituals are usually very easily constructed because that is the way things worked in the community, particularly in African communities where the griot would sing a song and the people would join in. That's the same tradition they were recreating here in America. And they would sing a song together. They would breathe together. And we know that when we sing together and we sit together, well, all things suddenly become possible. Now the first line is the second line is the third line. And then they simply say, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Well, now all around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. All around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. All around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Now, over the course of my life, I've met a lot of really interesting people. And one of the most interesting that I had the privilege of not only meeting, but becoming friends with for about 28, 29 years was the song leader, songwriter, Pete Seeger. Pete was a wonderful mentor. Pete and Toshi, his wife, were just remarkable human beings at living lives of service for others. And Pete, of course, took this song and others all around the world. He loved this song so much that he decided to kind of alter it as a songwriter, and he wrote 2 verses that I think really kind of pick up exactly what Rotary does. It takes the light that we have and it applies it in all kinds of ways, often to people who are having a lot less light than we have. And Pete wrote these 2 verses to kind of expand the song. Well, some say it's dark and we cannot see, but love lights the world for you and me. Some say turn around and just go hide, but we have the power to change the tide. Some call life a sad old story. We see a world that's bound for glory. The real power is yours and mine. Let your little light shine. Sing it with me, say, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light, this light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. One last time. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Oh, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Thank you.
You recognize that picture?
The poet Langston Hughes is one of my favorites. And he talked about that time of our beginning nation. He talked about the fact that so many were coming here and with dreams of freedom. And he says in a poem, hold fast to dreams, for when dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. With billowing sails, the galleons came, bringing men and dreams and women and dreams. Heart to heart, hand to hand, together, we began to build this land. Some were free hands, seeking a greater freedom. Some were indentured hands, holding in their hearts the seed of freedom. Some were slave hands, but one word was there always: freedom. Freedom is discussed so very often, but for all of us in the world, we realize that freedom can mean so many different things. And that, of course, is the complicated problem that we have, the ways in which we choose to define not only our freedom, but the freedom of others. And we know, of course, with my ancestors being in slavery, my great-great-grandmother lived on a plantation in Ashland, Virginia. And her people had come from the West Indies and probably had been sold in Richmond itself, probably at a place called Chaco Bottom, where there's now a monument, actually. It's not a very big monument. It's not like the 65-foot statues that were on Monument Avenue. This monument is under Route 95 going north. I've been to visit that monument. I went there actually with some relatives not too long ago, and I'll tell that story a little bit later. But I mention that because in that area, slavery, of course, flourished. And we carry the history of all of that. It is our American history. But the songs that were sung by those folks were the songs that I grew up listening to and hearing. And one in particular, one called Sheep, Sheep, Don't You Know the Road, was probably one of those songs that was sung on the Underground Railroad. I was talking to a group of elementary school children this morning in North Carolina. And I was talking to them because they had watched a video that I sent to them about the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad, of course, being one of the very first rainbow coalitions in America. One of the first times that people looked around them and saw that there was a great evil, there was a great problem in our nation, a nation founded on the principles of freedom. And yet there were over 4 million people in slavery. And those people of different races, different colors, different religions, different economic backgrounds, different philosophies, they looked at that problem and they said, we need to get rid of this. They became abolitionists and they began to work together in all kinds of different configurations. And the people who found themselves in slavery, my ancestors, helped themselves as well. And it was through that great movement, the Underground Railroad, that first rainbow coalition of people taking on a big issue. Now, of course, it would take them a long time to get some resolution. And of course, it would take a civil war to make that decision. But their work is not to be forgotten in that whole cauldron of opportunity. People like Harriet Tubman and people like Frederick Douglass, people like, well, the conductors and station masters, Thomas Garrett, and so many of them, John Brown, people who knew that they had to work to make sure that freedom was a reality. Now, the people in slavery, they worked themselves. Usually people escaping didn't have an Underground Railroad to help them escape. They would escape using secret code songs and spirituals to remind them of things that they had to remember. And this next song is one of those. It's one of my favorites. It's a song that comes from the Georgia Sea Islands. And it's a song that, as with most spirituals, refers back to the Bible, the Old Testament, because that's where most of the spirituals came from. Rural Southern songs made up very simply by people who were reminding themselves of stories of freedom. This particular song says, "Sheep, sheep, don't you know the road?" And the answer, as they sang in call and response, is, "Yes, my Lord, I know the road." Sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, Lord, I know the road. Maybe they were reminding themselves to get on the road after dark and to follow the North Star, or to follow some secret codes that had been given to them. Or maybe they were singing for those who had already made their escape, who they were hoping would get to freedom, but perhaps might never, ever know if they had reached freedom. In whatever they were singing for, the songs were helping to lift their spirits as they continued to work and to think about freedom. Sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, my Lord, I know the road. Sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, Lord, I know the road. Well, I say, sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, my Lord, I know the road. Sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, Lord, I know the road. Well, don't you know the road by the singing of the song? Yes, my Lord, I know the road. Don't you know the road by the singing of the song? Yes, Lord, I know the road. Well, now, don't you know the road by the praying of the prayer? Yes, my Lord, I know the road. Don't you know the road by the praying of the prayer? Yes, Lord, I know the road. Well, I say, sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, my Lord, I know the road. Sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, Lord, yes, my Lord. I say, sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, my Lord, I know the road. Sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, Lord, I know the road. Well, don't you know the road by the clapping of the hands? Yes, my Lord, I know the road. Don't you know the road by the clapping of the hands? Yes, Lord, I know the road. Well, now, don't you know the road by the going on home? Yes, my Lord, I know the road. Don't don't you know the road about going on home? Yes, Lord, I know the road. Well, I say, sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, my Lord, I know the road. Sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, Lord, yes, my Lord. I say, sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, my Lord, I know the road. Sheep, sheep, don't you know the road? Yes, Lord, I know the road. Well, I say, yes, Lord, I know the road. Well, I say, yes, Lord, I know the road. Oh, well, I say, yes, Lord, I know the road. Thank you. Well, there is no evidence of anyone in my family escaping on the Underground Railroad. They pretty much stayed on the plantation. Hickory Hill, 3,000 acres of land that 30 miles north of Richmond. And I didn't grow up really knowing very much about that area, even though sometimes my family would take trips south. And we would go down and we would stay with relatives in Richmond and Petersburg, Virginia. But in the year, I think it was 1992, my family decided to have a reunion, and over 300 people came to Richmond to celebrate the family name, the Hewlett, and to celebrate some information that one of my cousins sent word that she had found our family genealogy. Actually, she had done the genealogy. She was a teacher, Kay Bush Gray, in Richmond, Virginia. And Kay had gotten inspired by Roots, the book and the movie, as so many of us did in those days. And before Ancestry.com and 23andMe and all those DNA tests, she plunged into the historical centers and the legacy books and got stories from her mother, her grandmother, and other family members. And then she went to state records and she found where our family began. And it was on that plantation in Ashland, Virginia, called Hickory Hill. That weekend, I remember sitting with those 300 relatives, most of whom I was meeting for the first time, but there with my mother and my cousins and my aunts and uncles. And we read through that book that she gave us all. And then I took that big booklet home. That booklet talked not only about the Hewlett family, which is my family, but also about another family, the white family that owned us, the Wickhams. And we discovered that not only did General William Carter Wickham, a Confederate general, actually one of Robert E. Lee's right-hand cavalry generals, he was also a state legislator in Virginia. For 2 years, he was the president of the legislature. And after the war, he was the president of the C&O Railroad, the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad, a very prominent man. He fought valiantly in the Confederacy, and after the war, then of course he worked as a railroad man and continued trying to build his route, and actually made a name for himself, so much so that he had a statue in Monroe Park. That last year, during all of the cataclysm of unrest and conversations about what we do with Confederate statues, that statue was pulled to the ground. Williams Carter Wickham had 6 children by one of his people in slavery, a woman named Bib Hanna. And those 6 children were the start of my family. So Williams Carter Wickham, having children by his wife, Lucy, and having children by this slave, sent 2 families into the future, just like Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, and so many other families that started that way. Well, I took that booklet home and I read through it a few times. It was a wonderful thing as an African-American in 1992, before all of this genealogy stuff got started, to actually know where my family began. But it was also a little overwhelming. And I didn't really talk about it that much. Every now and then I would bring it up. And on one of those occasions, I was teaching in North Carolina. I was teaching a course for a week on the spirituals and slave relationships. And I had a class of about 30 people, adults, and on a Wednesday afternoon, I had covered all the material that I wanted to cover for that day. My class was really excited. They learned the songs, we sang them, we talked about the material. I had about 30 minutes left, and I thought, well, I can't let them go because that wasn't really cool. You know, they paid for the hours. And so I thought, what can I share with them? that would be of interest. And I remembered that information about my connection to the Wickham family. And I decided to, on a lark, just to share it. You never know what will happen by a simple mention of history, because we had a wonderful discussion, 30 minutes of vibrant conversation. And then I ended the class and people started off. And one of my students, a woman named Fran Oates, who I just talked to yesterday, came up to me and she said, you know, Reggie, I find your story fascinating, this connection to the Wickhams. And I'm going to tell you that I actually know that family. I said, you're kidding. She said, no, I'm not. I actually grew up with a good friend who I went to camp with named Lisa Wickham. And I'm pretty sure she's part of that family. And I said, wow, that's incredible. She said, yeah, I know. And I haven't thought of Lisa for 30 years, but she said, I'm gathering family stories about growing up in the South and my own personal stories, but I'm going to get in touch with Lisa. I'll find her somehow. I said, well, great. She said, if I find her, are you interested in talking to her? And I said, well, that'd be great. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't expect it to ever happen. But a year and a half later, I got an email from Fran. And she said that she had looked and looked and looked, and she discovered that Lisa was living back in Richmond, Virginia, after living several different places. And she said she called her and they had a wonderful reunion. So happy to hear from each other. And she said, I told her your story and she wants to talk to you. She gave me her number. She said, you can call her any day. And I thought, wow, I didn't expect this. Well, I took that number, but I would tell you, it took me 3 weeks to decide to make that phone call. Because conversations like this in our nation can be complicated and a little difficult. I wasn't sure what was going to be on the other side of the phone. But, you know, I've been doing this for so long and traveling around the world, talking about connections, reconnections, history, reconciliation, resolutions, history. I decided not to be a coward, and I decided to pick up the phone, and I dialed the number. A voice answered and I said, hi, I'm Reggie Harris. And the voice on the other end shocked me. She said, where have you been? I thought, where have I been? I said, well, you know, I travel a lot. And she said, you were supposed to call me 3 weeks ago. And I thought, oh my, she's kind of pushy. But I said, well, it's good to talk to you now. She says, wonderful to talk to you. She said, I understand we're cousins. And I said, well, yes. And she said, so we're white and black cousins. And I said, yeah, it seems like we are. And now I expected her to say immediately, so can you prove that? Can you send me something? But she said, how old are you? I said, how old am I? She said, yeah. I mean, she said, growing up, we didn't have a lot of cousins, and I love having cousins. And and I told her how old I was. She said, well, this is great, because if we're cousins, I'm 2 years older than you, so that means I can boss you around. This is how our relationship started, and it pretty much continues like that to this day. Well, we talked for about 2 hours, and then finally we sent each other material, and we kept talking, sending emails. I met her older sister, Wallace, when I was doing a performance in Boston, Massachusetts. And then after a year or so, I went to Richmond and I met Lisa. And we had dinner, and I stayed at her apartment, and her brother, George, who lives right around the corner, came around, and we had an amazing night of talking and kind of putting together the pieces. And then Lisa said, you know, the property where all of our family was, Hickory Hill, got sold a year ago. But she said, I know where it is, and I know that the person who owns it isn't there very often. So if you have some time tomorrow on your way home, because I was going home to Philadelphia, she said, I could take you by there and I could show you the place. I know all about it. I said, well, that would be interesting. She said, oh, it's off the highway. We'd have to drive the 25 miles and then 2 miles down a dirt road. And you'd have to be willing to hop a small fence. And I thought to myself, okay, so we're going to drive up 95, get off the highway, drive down a deserted dirt road for 2 miles, hop a small fence on somebody's property that neither of us knows. And I'll be doing all this with a white woman I just met and in the state of Virginia. What could go wrong? Well, that's what we did. We hopped over that fence and we walked around, and she showed me the different buildings and the gardens that she said people had come from all around the world to see. They were friends with Admiral Robert Peary, and they actually, William Carter Wickham's wife, Lucy, was a cousin of Robert E. Lee. So they were a very prominent family. We walked around, we walked up on the porch, and every now and then, we'd kind of look at each other, our eyes would meet, and then we didn't quite know what to say, but we had an amazing day walking around for about 2.5 hours and taking some pictures. And then finally, we decided we stayed on somebody else's property for long enough. So we went back to our cars, and I thanked her for bringing me. And we hugged each other, and I went north, she went south. And for 2 weeks, I could think of nothing else. And of course, when a songwriter is thinking of nothing else, usually a song comes out of it. But I couldn't write the song just as my song, because I knew that the experience had belonged to both of us. So I called Lisa and I said, Lisa, I've been thinking about writing a song, but I need to know from you what it was you were thinking and feeling that day, if you're willing to share it. And she said, I knew you were going to call me. She said, I would be willing to share it. And we talked for another 2 hours. It was an amazing thing walking on that property that day. And I'd like to play for you the song that came out of that. And so much more has happened. That whole story has landed our family, Lisa, Clayton, my cousin, Wallace, on CNN and in the New York Times, as we've talked about finding a way to face our history, but not be defined by it. And it all started that day in our walk at Hickory Hill. And that would be the wrong video. But this would be the right one. Barren fields to the horizon, the ghosts of autumn catch the wind. Memories of those saints and sinners gather round to haunt us once again. Now we're finally here together, standing silent face to face. Secret family undercover, born of shame, saved by hope and grace. Hickory Hill, we're on hallowed ground, walking side by side, wondering what we found. Hearts break open wide across the great divide. I can see the questions in your eyes now that we are home again. They celebrate the grand illusion, and they write it up for all to see. But in that mystery of confusion, there lies a truth that might one day set us free. So now our stories come together across these fields of broken dreams. And the blood that binds us all together, oh, is indeed much thicker than it seems. Oh, Hickory Hill, we're on hallowed ground, walking side by side, wondering what we found. Hearts break open wide across the great divide. And you see the questions in my eyes now that we are home again. We are home again. Oh. On solid ground, standing side by side, wondering what we found. Hearts break open wide across the great divide. Can you hear those demons as they die, now that we are home again? Thank you. Can you hear those demons as they die? We are in the midst of still dealing with some of our demons, and in the midst of opening windows and opportunities to connect ourselves. And certainly the opportunities I've had to interact with Rotarians in a variety of different places, I see that you're doing that not only here in America, but all around the world. But it is here in America that we are challenged and finding new opportunities. And I think in that moment about Woody Guthrie, who traveled this great land and who told stories about people who were not able to tell their own stories. And it was his songs that opened my eyes when in second grade, my second grade teacher said, boys and girls, we're going to sing a song by a man who used to travel and who wrote songs about it to introduce people to other people. And that was where I first heard the song, This Land Is Your Land. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Nobody living can ever stop me as I walk down that freedom highway, nobody living, oh, can make me turn back. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. Oh, this land is my land. From California, oh, to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land was made for you and me. Thank you so much for your time today.